All right, everyone, you're ready to tackle that feeling, like that little flip in your stomach, the one that just shows up uninvited whenever you even think about having to speak up, let alone stand up and talk to a crowd.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there. It's pretty universal, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And that's exactly why we're diving deep, deep into this book today. Public Speaking, Speak Like a Pro by James W. Williams. The title kind of says it all, doesn't it? But what I love about this book is that, well, it doesn't just throw a bunch of techniques at you. It actually delves into the why behind those fears and anxieties we all have about public speaking.
I agree. And James really lays himself bare right from the start. He talks about his own journey, and it's not what you'd expect from someone who's now written a book, about being a master presenter. He was painfully shy, and he even shares the story about being in a school play where he was cast as wait for it, a tree.
No way, a tree, that's amazing.
Right. The irony is not lost on him either. He's supposed to be this, symbol of rootedness and strength, and he completely freezes up on stage. Mind goes blank. Can't even remember his one line.
That's got to be rough. I can just imagine the awkward silence.
Yeah, he talks about how mortifying it was. But here's the thing. He didn't let that define him. Fast forward a few years, and he's built this whole career around communication, teaching people how to conquer those very same fears that he struggled with.
That's seriously inspiring. It shows that transformation is possible, no matter where you're starting from. And what's interesting is that his journey really took off when he started working, of all things, in telemarketing.
Exactly. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? You'd think someone who is so shy would avoid a job that requires constant talking. But he actually found that he had a knack for connecting with people over the phone. It became this sort of training ground for him, where he honed his communication skills in a less intimidating environment.
It's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention. He had to communicate to do his job, and in the process, he discovered a hidden talent. And it just underscores that point, right?
Yeah.
That we often have more potential than we realize. We just need the right nudge, the right opportunity to tap into it.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our mission for today, right? We're going to take all the wisdom and practical advice that James has packed into this book, and we're going to break it down for you, our listeners, in a way that's easy to digest and hopefully, even more importantly, easy to put into action.
So if you're someone who's ever felt that knot in your stomach at the thought of public speaking, or maybe you just want to up your game and become a more confident and engaging speaker, well, you're definitely in the right place. And I think it's safe to say that this is one deep dive where taking notes is highly encouraged.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in, shall we? James starts by tackling what he calls the battle within. And the first concept he introduces is something we're all familiar with. The comfort zone. You know, that cozy little bubble we like to hang out in where everything is familiar and predictable.
Ah, yes, the comfort zone. It can be so tempting to just stay there, right? But James describes it as an anxiety-neutral position, which I thought was a really interesting way of putting it. It's not that there's no anxiety there. It's just that it's a level we've become accustomed to, a baseline that we've learned to manage.
And that's where the danger lies, isn't it? Because while staying in our comfort zone might feel safe in the short term, it comes at a cost. We're essentially sacrificing growth and potential for the sake of familiarity.
It's like he says, the couch may be comfortable, but it won't get you to the top of the mountain.
Exactly. He even uses this visual analogy of a line chart. On one axis you have performance, and on the other you have time. So when we're in our comfort zone, that line stays pretty flat, consistent, but ultimately limited. But when we push ourselves outside of that zone, that line might fluctuate a bit. There might be some dips, some moments of uncertainty, but the overall trajectory is upward, leading to much higher levels of achievement in the long run.
I like that visual. It's a great reminder that even though stepping outside your comfort zone can feel a bit scary, it's rarely as disastrous as our imagination makes it out to be. We tend to overestimate the risk and underestimate our ability to adapt and learn from new experiences.
And he specifically addresses introverts here, people who naturally recharge their batteries in solitude and might find that pull towards the familiar especially strong. But his point is that it's not about becoming someone you're not. It's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of their personality, has the capacity to grow and expand their comfort zone.
Right. And even for introverts, pushing those boundaries can be incredibly rewarding, both personally and professionally. It's not about becoming the life of the party, but about developing the skills and confidence to navigate those situations that push you outside of your comfort zone.
And I think it's really important to emphasize here that he's not suggesting that everyone needs to become some kind of extroverted, always-on performer. It's much more nuanced than that. It's about recognizing that growth often happens when we challenge ourselves to do things that feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit scary even.
Exactly. It's about pushing those edges little by little and realizing that those scary monsters lurking in the shadows are often just figments of our imagination. And speaking of imagination, he introduces this concept of the fictional friend or foe and uses this really funny and kind of embarrassing story about his high school crush, Gina.
Oh, I love that story.
It's so relatable, right? He basically builds this whole relationship with this girl in his head based on like a couple of smiles and passing glances in the hallway. And of course, as these things often do, it ends in this hilariously awkward reality check.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how our imagination can run wild, especially when it comes to social interactions. We create these elaborate stories in our minds, these scenarios that have very little basis in reality, and then we react to those stories as if they were actually happening.
It's like we're living in our own little soap operas, and not always the ones with happy endings. But the takeaway, and I think this is really crucial, is that a lot of the fear and anxiety we feel around public speaking stems from the same kind of imaginative storytelling. We picture the audience judging us, laughing at us, maybe even throwing tomatoes.
And those imagined scenarios trigger the same fear response as if they were actually happening, even though they're just playing out in our heads.
Exactly. So he really drives home the point that the real battle isn't with the audience out there. It's the one going on inside our own heads. But then he does this really clever flip and argues that imagination, if channeled correctly, is actually the most powerful tool a public speaker has.
It's about taking control of that narrative, about consciously choosing to create a more positive and empowering story. Instead of picturing a hostile audience, imagine them as people who are genuinely interested in what you have to say.
See them nodding their heads, maybe even taking notes. Imagine them being inspired by your words, maybe even laughing at your jokes. Because when you change the story you're telling yourself, you change the way you feel and you change the way you show up.
And that perfectly segues into his next section, building blocks of confidence. He starts by talking about these lies we tell ourselves, which is a phrase that really resonated with me.
Me too. It's so true, right? We all have these negative beliefs about ourselves, these limiting stories that we've often been carrying around for years.
Yeah, and sometimes they're so deeply ingrained that we don't even realize they're there. But they're operating in the background, sabotaging our efforts and holding us back from reaching our full potential.
He gives the example of being labeled as shy as a child. And I think so many people can relate to that, right? You get called shy enough times and you start to believe it. And then guess what? You act shy. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally. These labels, even when they're meant to be harmless, can become incredibly limiting. And it's not just about childhood labels either. It's about all those negative messages we've internalized over the years, those "I'm not good enoughs" and "I can't do that."
And he contrasts this with the example of Abraham Lincoln. Now, picture Lincoln, this iconic figure who delivered some of the most powerful and moving speeches in history. But what's fascinating is that, by all accounts, he was incredibly nervous, even terrified of public speaking.
Imagine the pressure he must have been under, right? Leading a nation through one of its most tumultuous periods, having to deliver these incredibly high-stakes addresses. He could have easily used any number of excuses, could have claimed illness, stage fright, whatever.
But he didn't. He pushed through that fear, that discomfort, and rose to the occasion. And I think that's a powerful reminder that even the most seemingly confident and successful people often have those same doubts and anxieties. It's about finding ways to manage them, to not let them dictate your actions.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, he uses this really beautiful analogy. He talks about life in rocky places and describes this image of a flower stubbornly pushing its way up through cracks in the pavement, blooming in this seemingly barren and hostile environment.
I love that image. It's so visually powerful, right? And it speaks to that inherent resilience, that inner strength that we all possess.
Yeah. It's a reminder that your external circumstances don't dictate your ultimate success. It's about those internal resources, that mindset that allows you to flourish regardless of the challenges you face.
And that's a message that applies directly to public speaking, right? We often get so caught up in those external factors, those perceived limitations, that we forget to tap into that wellspring of strength and resilience within ourselves.
Absolutely. And that leads him to this concept of building pillars with stones. He argues that instead of viewing our challenges as insurmountable obstacles, we should reframe them as the raw materials, the stones with which we build the foundational pillars of our success.
He even shares this incredibly inspiring story of an Indian artist who was born without arm function. And this guy doesn't just paint. He creates these incredibly intricate and detailed works of art. And he does it all using his feet and his mouth.
Talk about a testament to human potential. It's a powerful reminder that limitations often exist more in our minds than in reality.
Exactly. And it's a perfect segue into the next concept, regaining and retaining your crown. He emphasizes the importance of consciously choosing to believe in your inherent ability to speak publicly. It's about recognizing that you have something valuable to share and that you deserve to be heard.
And it's not about denying those feelings of fear or doubt. They're normal, and they're likely to show up, especially when you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. But the key is to not let those feelings dominate the narrative.
It's about consciously choosing to believe in yourself, even when it feels hard, even when those butterflies in your stomach are doing somersaults. Okay, so we've tackled those internal hurdles, those limiting beliefs and anxieties that can hold us back. Now it's time to move on to part 2, setting the stage.
And the first crucial element he emphasizes here is understanding the why. And that is discovering your underlying purpose for speaking. It's not just about wanting to give a presentation or deliver a speech, but about understanding the deeper reason, the driving force behind that desire.
He shares a really moving anecdote about his father and a man named Tim. And the story really highlights the difference between doing something because you think you should and doing something because you have a deep, burning need to do it.
It's that fire in your belly, that unshakable belief in the importance of your message that will fuel you through the inevitable challenges and moments of self-doubt.
He also cautions against doing it for the wrong reasons, like chasing fame or external validation. That kind of motivation might get you started, but it won't sustain you in the long run.
And speaking of sustainability, he then delves into choosing your fights carefully. And he starts by addressing how to decide on the what. And that means the actual content of your speech.
He stresses the importance of planning and rehearsing, even if the topic is assigned to you. He uses the analogy of preparing for a high-stakes political debate, which is arguably one of the most pressure-filled public speaking scenarios imaginable.
Think about those candidates up on stage, right? They're fielding tough questions, thinking on their feet, under intense scrutiny. They might look calm and collected, but you can bet there's a whole team of people behind the scenes who have meticulously prepared them for every possible scenario.
Exactly. It's not about winging it. It's about putting in the work, researching your topic thoroughly, and crafting a message that's clear, concise, and compelling.
And if you're given a specific topic, he emphasizes the importance of approaching it with integrity. Do your research, make sure your facts are accurate, and present the information in a way that's both informative and engaging.
And if you're lucky enough to have some flexibility in choosing your topic, he suggests starting with your own area of expertise, something you're genuinely passionate about. Because when you speak from a place of knowledge and enthusiasm, it shows, and it makes a huge difference in how your message is received.
It's about finding that sweet spot where your passion intersects with the needs and interests of your audience.
Okay, so we've covered the importance of having a strong why and choosing the right what. Now let's talk about paying attention to the seasons. And no, he's not talking about the weather.
Not this time. He's talking about the current social climate and the need to be mindful of the sensitivities and complexities of the world we live in. He uses the term political correctness, but I think it's really more about being socially conscious and aware of the potential impact of our words.
He's talking about being inclusive and respectful, about avoiding language that could be hurtful or offensive to certain groups. And it's not about censoring yourself or being afraid to speak your truth. It's about finding a way to communicate your message in a way that's both authentic and considerate.
Exactly. He uses this really interesting analogy of a tightrope walker who's also juggling fragile objects. It's about finding that delicate balance, right, between staying true to yourself and your message while also being mindful of your audience and the broader context.
And to help us navigate this tricky terrain, he offers 2 key questions. Am I trying too hard to be liked, rather than focusing on delivering a message that's meaningful and impactful? And, is this courting unnecessary controversy, or am I over-sanitizing my message to the point of blandness? The goal is to find that sweet spot, that authentic middle ground.
Absolutely. It's about speaking your truth, but doing so in a way that's both engaging and respectful. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of having a strong why, choosing the right what, and being mindful of the seasons. Now let's move on to creating a winning strategy.
And I love how he redefines winning in the context of public speaking. It's not necessarily about getting a standing ovation or becoming an instant viral sensation. It's about setting realistic and achievable goals and then celebrating those small wins along the way.
Exactly. It's about overcoming your own fear, connecting with your audience in a meaningful way, and feeling good about the experience.
And a big part of that winning strategy is silencing that inner critic, that voice of self-doubt that loves to chime in with all sorts of unhelpful commentary. He talks about the importance of consciously replacing those negative thoughts with positive affirmations.
He actually shares how he personally started incorporating affirmations into his routine by listening to motivational speeches from people he admired. It's about finding what works for you, whether it's repeating positive mantras, visualizing yourself succeeding, or simply taking a few moments each day to acknowledge your strengths and accomplishments.
And then he dives into some practical tips for structuring your speech. He suggests starting with a strong introduction that grabs the audience's attention and clearly outlines your main points. He even suggests using humor, but with a word of caution, make sure it's appropriate for the occasion and that you're comfortable with the potential risks.
He also recommends breaking your speech down into manageable chunks, using visual aids like slides or props to keep the audience engaged, and incorporating stories and anecdotes to make your points more relatable and memorable. And crucially, he emphasizes the importance of practicing your delivery beforehand so you feel confident and comfortable when it's time to shine.
He even shares his own experience with telling a joke that totally bombed, which is a great reminder that even the best laid plans can go awry. But the important thing is to learn from those experiences and to not let them derail your confidence.
Exactly. It's all part of the process. And finally, he addresses the often overlooked but incredibly important aspect of bracing yourself for conflict.
Because let's face it, even with the most meticulous preparation and the best intentions, there's always a chance that something unexpected will happen. You might get asked a tough question, you might encounter technical difficulties, or you might even face some pushback or criticism from the audience.
And his advice here is gold. First, don't take things personally. Remember that you can't please everyone, and that even the most seasoned speakers encounter resistance from time to time.
Second, focus on what you can control. Be prepared to handle challenging questions gracefully, either by deflecting them politely or by acknowledging that you don't have all the answers.
And if you find yourself facing online negativity, try to filter out the noise. Learn from constructive criticism, but don't let the haters get you down.
Ultimately, it's about remembering that you are the one in control of your message and that your worth as a speaker is not determined by the reactions of others. So we've navigated the internal landscape, strategized our content, and now it's time to move on to the often overlooked but incredibly important aspect of looking the part.
This is Chapter 7, and it's all about making a strong first impression, which, as we all know, can be crucial, especially in a public speaking context. He emphasizes that you have a very limited window, just a few seconds, to make an impact, and that your attire and overall presentation speak volumes before you even open your mouth.
He specifically addresses the potential discomfort that introverts might feel about dressing up or being the center of attention. But his point is that what makes us feel comfortable in our everyday lives might not necessarily be what projects confidence and credibility on stage.
So while those comfy sweatpants and that old band t-shirt might be perfect for a night in, they're probably not going to cut it when you're standing in front of an audience. It's about finding a style that makes you feel both confident and authentic.
And he cautions against going overboard in either direction. You don't want to be so casual that you come across as unprofessional, but you also don't want to be so dressed up that you look like you're trying too hard, or worse, that you're uncomfortable. The key is to find that sweet spot, that balance between looking sharp and feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Exactly. And he provides a really handy list of style mistakes to avoid. First and foremost, anything that could distract the audience from your message. That means avoiding flashy jewelry, loud patterns, or anything that's too revealing or provocative.
Yeah, you want the focus to be on your words, not on what you're wearing. Second, don't dress too casually, even if the event is informal.
You can always add a touch of personality with accessories, but keep it tasteful and appropriate.
Third, be mindful of your audience and the context of the event. Avoid clothing choices that could be insensitive or offensive.
Fourth, prioritize basic hygiene. That means showering, brushing your teeth, and making sure your clothes are clean and wrinkle-free.
And fifth, pay attention to the details. Make sure your shoes are polished, your nails are trimmed, and your hair is styled in a way that makes you feel confident and put together.
It's about presenting the best version of yourself, both visually and verbally. And speaking of presentation, he offers some really practical advice on how to dress like a pro. First, prioritize grooming. That means a clean shave, a neatly trimmed beard, or simple and elegant makeup if you wear it.
Second, make hygiene a non-negotiable. A fresh shower, brush teeth, deodorant, the works. It might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people overlook these basics.
Third, go easy on the accessories. Choose simple, understated pieces that complement your outfit without overwhelming it. Less is often more.
Fourth, dress for the occasion and the theme of your speech. If you're speaking at a formal business conference, your attire should reflect that. But if you're giving a talk about sustainability at a community event, you might choose a more relaxed and approachable look.
And finally, and perhaps most importantly, remember to infuse your own personality into your style. You want to feel authentic and comfortable, not like you're wearing a costume.
And remember, it's not just about the clothes you choose, it's also about how you carry yourself in them. Stand up straight, make eye contact, and use your body language to project confidence and engage with your audience.
It's about owning the stage, owning your message, and owning your style. Okay, so we're looking sharp, we're feeling prepared, and now it's time to move on to part 3, going for gold.
And Chapter 8 dives right into the heart of it all, the art of public speaking. And the first point he makes is so simple, yet so profound. Public speaking isn't just about the speaker. It's about connecting with your audience.
It's about creating a dialogue, even if the format is technically a monologue. It's about making your listeners feel seen, heard, and engaged.
And one of the most powerful tools for creating that connection is storytelling. And James is a master storyteller himself, using personal anecdotes throughout the book to illustrate his points and make his advice more relatable and memorable.
Exactly. Stories have this amazing ability to draw people in, to make complex ideas more accessible, and to create an emotional connection that transcends the purely intellectual.
And he talks about voice modulations. Now, this might seem like a technical detail, but it's actually crucial for keeping your audience engaged. If you speak in a monotone, people are going to tune out no matter how fascinating your content might be.
Think about the best documentary narrators or those captivating audiobook voices. They know how to use their voices to create drama, build suspense, and convey emotion. It's about bringing your words to life.
And he provides some really practical tips on how to charm your audience. First, come armed with information that's genuinely surprising or new. Don't just rehash the same old, tired facts and figures.
Second, use language that everyone can understand. Avoid technical jargon or overly complicated vocabulary. The goal is to communicate clearly and effectively, not to impress people with your vocabulary.
And third, be flexible and adaptable. If you sense that your audience is losing interest, don't be afraid to deviate from your script, adjust your pace, or even throw in a spontaneous anecdote or joke.
It's about being present and responsive to the energy in the room. And speaking of jokes, he also talks about the art of showing your witty side. Now, this doesn't mean you have to become a stand-up comedian. It's more about finding ways to inject humor into your presentation in a way that feels natural and authentic.
He suggests a few techniques, like sharing a self-deprecating anecdote, incorporating a quick audience activity, or telling a well-timed joke. But he also cautions that humor can be tricky, and that it's important to know your audience and to be comfortable with the potential risks.
And finally, within the art of public speaking, he talks about the importance of elocution. Now, this might sound a bit old-fashioned, but it's essentially about the art of speaking clearly and effectively.
It's about enunciating your words, projecting your voice, and using pauses and intonation to emphasize key points. It's also about being mindful of your body language and making sure your facial expressions and gestures align with your words.
He makes this really interesting point that public speaking is, in many ways, a performance, and that we can learn a lot by observing and studying skilled actors, singers, and other performers.
So we've covered the art of connecting with your audience, using storytelling, modulating your voice, injecting humor, and speaking clearly and effectively. Now let's move on to Chapter 9, where he focuses on managing your stage.
And he starts by addressing the importance of movement. Now, for some people, the thought of moving around on stage can be terrifying. They'd rather just stand frozen behind a podium.
But he argues that purposeful movement can actually be really powerful. It can help you command attention, emphasize key points, and connect with your audience on a deeper level.
And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. He suggests simple techniques like taking a few steps forward when you want to emphasize a point, or using hand gestures to illustrate your ideas.
He also stresses the importance of being mindful of your posture. Stand up straight, shoulders back, head held high. It might sound cliché, but your posture really does affect how you feel and how you come across.
And he offers some practical advice for managing those inevitable pre-speech jitters. First, slow down. When we're nervous, we tend to speak faster, which can make our words harder to understand.
So take a deep breath and consciously slow down your pace. Make sure you're enunciating clearly and that your voice is projecting to the back of the room.
Second, make sure you've eaten something beforehand. You don't want to be dealing with hunger pangs or low blood sugar on top of everything else. He recommends a high-protein meal a couple of hours before your speech to give you sustained energy.
And avoid cold drinks, which can constrict your vocal cords. Stick to room temperature water or a soothing herbal tea with honey.
He also encourages us to turn up the drama, and I love that phrase. It's not about being over the top, it's about using theatrical techniques to enhance your presentation and keep your audience engaged.
He suggests speaking with confidence, even if you don't feel it, keeping your opening remarks short and sweet, and using dramatic pauses to create suspense and emphasize key points.
And then he talks about using the stage for one. And this might seem counterintuitive because we've been talking so much about connecting with the audience, but his point is that the stage is ultimately your platform, your opportunity to share your message with the world.
It's about respecting your allotted time, delivering your message clearly and concisely, and prioritizing the content over your own ego or your fear of judgment.
And most importantly, it's about having fun. Because when you're genuinely enjoying yourself, it shows, and it makes the whole experience more enjoyable for everyone involved.
Okay, we've navigated the stage itself. We've talked about how to manage our nerves and deliver our message with impact. Now let's explore Chapter 10, Tools of the Trade.
And first up, he talks about coaching your speed with teleprompters. Now, some people might think teleprompters are just for news anchors or politicians, but he argues that they can be a really useful tool for anyone who wants to improve their public speaking skills.
Teleprompters can help you maintain eye contact with your audience while still delivering your message accurately and smoothly. They can be especially helpful for situations where precise wording is crucial, like delivering prepared remarks or giving a presentation with a lot of technical information.
He does offer a few tips for using teleprompters effectively. First, always have a printed backup of your script, just in case of technical difficulties.
Second, incorporate cues into your prompter text to remind you to pause, make eye contact, or adjust your delivery. You don't want to sound like a robot. And third, experiment with the scrolling speed to find a pace that feels comfortable and natural for you.
Next, he talks about speech training apps, which is an area that's really exploded in recent years. There are so many amazing apps out there now that can help you improve your speaking skills, from virtual reality simulators that allow you to practice in front of a virtual audience to apps that provide real-time feedback on your grammar, pacing, and delivery.
He highlights a few categories of apps. First, simulator apps, which, as the name suggests, simulate the experience of public speaking. They can create different scenarios, like giving a presentation at a conference or leading a team meeting, and they can even provide feedback on your body language and eye contact.
Then there are coach apps, which are like having a personal speech coach in your pocket. They can listen to your speech and give you feedback on things like your use of filler words, your pacing, and your pronunciation.
And finally, there are voice tutor apps, which focus specifically on your vocal delivery. They can help you improve your pitch, tone, and volume, and they can even provide exercises to help you warm up your voice and improve your breath control.
And then, of course, there's the good old-fashioned complement your presentation with visual aids. And while PowerPoint might not be the most glamorous tool, he argues that it can be incredibly effective when used correctly.
He stresses the importance of using slides sparingly and focusing on one key idea per slide. He also recommends using visuals, like images, charts, or videos, to break up text and make your presentation more engaging.
And finally, he talks about the importance of using timers to keep you on track. Respecting your allotted time is crucial for making a good impression, and it's also just good manners. He suggests using a timer during practice sessions to get a sense of how long your presentation actually takes, and then adjusting your content accordingly.
He also recommends having a backup plan in case you run out of time, like having a shortened version of your speech prepared or being comfortable with skipping over certain sections. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the internal battle, setting the stage, the art of public speaking itself, managing the stage, and using the tools of the trade. And I think one of the key takeaways from James W. Williams's Public Speaking, Speak Like a Pro, is that becoming a confident and effective public speaker is a journey, not a destination.
It's about consistently pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, practicing your skills, learning from your mistakes, and celebrating your successes along the way.
It's about embracing the challenge and finding joy in the process. And on that note, here's a final thought for our listeners to ponder. Think about one specific limiting belief you hold about yourself as a speaker.
It might be, I'm not good at public speaking, or I always get nervous, or I don't have anything interesting to say. Whatever it is, write it down. And then the next time you have an opportunity to speak up, no matter how small, consciously challenge that belief.
Notice how it feels to push past that self-imposed limitation. Notice the positive feedback you receive, even if it's just a smile or a nod of agreement. Because every time you do that, you're chipping away at that limiting belief, and you're building your confidence brick by brick.
It's about taking those small steps consistently and trusting that you have the power to become the speaker you want to be. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
And a huge thanks to you for listening. If you found this deep dive helpful, we highly recommend checking out James's book. He's also offering a free bonus ebook called Bulletproof Confidence Checklist, which you can find a link to in the show notes.
And remember, the journey to becoming a confident and compelling speaker starts with a single step.
So go out there, embrace the challenge, and start speaking your truth.